Give and Gain, applying exchange theory to foster wellness and belonging in the workplace. Exchange theory suggests that individuals typically pursue relationships that maximize benefits and minimize costs. That same principle can be applied to the process of selecting a job or career path. This panel will examine how and why you should evaluate potential job opportunities through the lens of exchange theory to make informed decisions that align your career goals with your values, personal well-being, and interests. Imran obtained his graduate degree from Portland State University in 2008. Immediately after that, he began his college teaching career. He taught persuasion and leadership at the University of Portland and later interpersonal communication courses at Oregon State University for 8 years. Imran has worked as a college educator for more than 14 years, and he also worked on a small business venture for 5 years as the director of operations. From that experience, he's able to bring real-life anecdotes into class discussion and material for workplace-related discourse. Haider joined the Murrow College in 2020, teaching public speaking in the digital age. In the past, he has presented research on the misperception of terrorism in mainstream news, and after traveling to Karachi in 2016, how the culture of individualism and uncertainty avoidance in Karachi, Pakistan is misconceived. Imran has also built the course DEI and Communication Organizations, the first class of its kind for the Murrow College. Please welcome Imran.
You sound like a big deal, so I appreciate that. So how many of you have ever learned about exchange theory in your classes at some point? All right, good. Okay, we'll discuss that. So exchange theory was kind of the motivator to want to have this conversation because it is the subconscious analysis of cost versus reward equals outcome. And so when you're dating somebody and they live 5 minutes away and you're thinking about dating somebody that lives 45 minutes away, you subconsciously will favor whether that person who lives 5 minutes away is in fact a better match. You will favor that 5 minutes away person over the 45 minutes. Why? Because you're going to incur less cost to see them frequently, throughout the week or whatever it is. So this theory sort of comparison in the workplace is we need to really have, again, what's the theme of today's symposium is lesser discussed or untold stories. We don't talk often enough about how we are to evaluate job opportunities and what is it going to cost us to work there, which we don't really think about, right? We think about what we're going to get paid, but what is it going to cost us and what benefits or rewards are we going to get? And that should equal our outcome. And I've worked at different universities and colleges and other private companies where I just didn't know. I was just going, day to day through my work life. And at some point I realized that the costs were outweighing the rewards for me. And so one shameless plug I'll say is that until I worked at Washington University, I didn't realize what that environment should be like, where the benefits clearly outweigh my costs working here. And it's not even close. So I want to go through and have each person give a brief intro, and then I'm going to ask them some questions, but I want you to feel free to raise your hand if something is engaging you and you're curious about something on this topic. Then please feel free to raise your hand. We'll try to get to all your questions because I think that's the main objective. I have questions here, but we want you to feel like you are able to have some meaningful conversations. So we'll start with Daisy, and this is Daisy, and you can tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so my name's Daisy Zavala, and I'm actually a Murrow alum. I graduated, I think it was 2021. It's kind of blurry because it was sort of pandemic, so we didn't have like an in-person graduation. And I was freelancing as a student, some internships. And then my first job was with the Seattle Times covering breaking news during the odd hours, 2 to 10 p.m. And I did that for about 2 years and a half, almost 2 years, 4 months. And then I decided that it wasn't working, and I decided to move to Arizona to work at a small paper in the border town of Nogales, Arizona. And I've been there 6 months, and so far it's been like a really great it was a great opportunity at first, I thought, but it's been more enriching than just like job wise, if that makes sense. Like in every facet, just being close to Mexico, being able to sort of go between both cultures. And that's something that I didn't grow up with, in Washington State, obviously. So that's the skinny of it, I
Awesome.
guess.
That's great. All right, Lisa.
My name is Lisa Vailencour. It's weird to do this without a mic, actually.
Yeah.
You made it earlier.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
I have been in communications, brand, and strategic advisor executive in the tech industry for over 20 years, which is hilarious because I never wanted to work in tech, but I somehow managed to survive. And I've worked at places like Microsoft, AWS, Motorola Solutions, Indeed. Sonos, where else did I go? Oh, and then just recently did some consulting with the Silicon Valley Product Group for product management.
Awesome.
I graduated in 2017.
27. Okay.
Do we
With
have
your
to say
graduate degree, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Do we have to say when we graduate?
No, you don't. I don't ever say that. I don't
Okay.
want them to know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I graduated from Monroe School at some point a long time ago. I'm Melanie Coon. I'm currently the PR manager at Puget Sound Energy, but have had a pretty varied career. I started out as intern with the Ferry Group, which is a PR firm in Seattle. Then I worked in the construction industry, and I spent the majority of my career at the State Department of Transportation, crisis communications, environmental, bridges, everything. And then I worked for Premier Blue Cross in healthcare. And now I'm at Puget Sound Energy, and the thread throughout the career has been media relations. So working with reporters, pitching stories, doing crisis communications, responding. So it's a varied career.
So they're great and wealth of knowledge and great experience. And so we're going to try to, I'll ask some questions here and get the dialogue going. And like I said, if you have anything, feel free to raise your hand. So first question, anyone can feel free to jump in, whoever wants to answer first. But how or what factors in job structure should employees new to the workforce, their personal well-being or job requirements to find the best position? And the context of that question is, what do you think is the number one thing that new workforce or college graduates look at when they apply before you decide on what job you want to apply for? What do you think is the top category that we're looking at? Okay. All right. So we look at hourly or salary, and what we're trying to do here is sort of uncover, are there jump in those, right? So what do you have as far as, I know you said you just switched and you feel like it's fulfilling.
Mhm.
So elaborate on that and kind of talk about different categories that jump out at you that maybe you didn't know when you first entered that business.
Yeah, so I'm first gen, first of all. So I think when you're talking about like entering the workforce, I kind of had no idea what I should be looking at. So when I went into the Seattle Times as an intern and they extended it, and so when they gave me the job offer, I was like, oh great, like I've experience here so far, and the pay is like, it's a living wage. It's a living wage for Seattle. And it's hard to come by with jobs in the journalism industry, in print especially. But I really wasn't thinking, oh, should I look at, the work environment, my colleagues? Am I going to be working alone? Am I going to be collaborating? And I wish I had, because ultimately that's kind of why I left. I didn't really feel like my skill set was valued at all. And then working the odd hours that I did, oftentimes it was just me in the newsroom writing or self-editing or sending it to someone through Slack, if you use Slack. And yeah, it started to feel very isolating and lonely. And that's not why I got into journalism, right? I got into it because I love writing. I love meeting people. Like just the whole process, interviewing and being able to share what someone's experience is, or hold power to account, which is another facet of it. And so when I was going into my new job, I kind of looked at, well, what work do they do? Who am I going to be working with? Do I like, am I, so just beyond the work itself and what I would be covering, is it a place that I would want to live in at least for a little bit? And the answer was yes. So it was like, it was very layered. So I think you can take a job if you want to live in the city. You can take the job if you want it for your may, or if you're intrigued by it. I think it just needs to be clear before you accept any offer, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, pay is obviously important. So, I mean, and you shouldn't. I used to be a corporate recruiter. Negotiate for your pay. It's critically important. Your satisfaction of your life. I would say it's really important though to make sure that, like, I know you're not supposed to say this anymore, but I'm say it. Like, the cultural fit is really important. So, like, aside from pay, you obviously have a skill set you're bringing, a piece of education. They're going to give you something which is paying, obviously, something else. But what do you want to learn from being there? And if you're like, well, I don't really know, I think this company's great, they have a great brand. That's great. Like, go on their website, look at their C-suite, look at those C-suite leaders in the press. Like, what's their good LinkedIn posts? What's their bad press? That's usually the company is coming from top down. So do you know, or do they have a corporate, you know, they have corporate values. Do you see that messaged in those executives that are going out and doing their talks and their posts? I think are really important. And then even if you are interviewing for a job, you know, an entry-level job in this department or on this particular team, LinkedIn is amazing now. So, like, find all those people and again, see, like, what can you learn from this person's background that's intriguing to you? Because once you get into the company, you'll want to try to find your mentors and people to lean on. I think is really important.
It's great. Anything to add?
Just briefly, if you can understand if you're going to be a big fish in a little pond, or if you're going to be a small fish in a big pond. What I mean by that, if it's a small company, you'll have a lot of variety. You'll be doing more. You'll be working with pretty much almost the whole company because it's so small. But if you're with a large company, you're kind of in this comm department, and then you have to have permission to kind of break out. And so it just depends on the company. But what I always thought about was small fish, big pond, little fish, or whatever. Big fish, little pond.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I would say when I was 22, 23, even in my mid to late 20s, I didn't understand that there's retirement, there's benefits, there's standing up or sitting down, there's working at a cubicle or a computer, working with other people every day, selling or not selling, like so many jobs are sales, and I was never cut out for sales. So I think what they're saying is great, because you compile this list in your head when you're an undergraduate, and if you're a communication major, which I was, it's like, oh, I'm going to go and write about something or share information about something, and I'm going to get paid to do it. And it's just not that simple. There's 100 different categories to consider for your personality. So the next question is going to be related to exchange theory. And again, in my classes, I try to make the analogy to romantic relationships, because the best romantic relationships, whether you're, in a marriage or dating somebody, is both people, when you go out to dinner and you have talk, both people should feel like they're getting a good deal. That's the best relationship, where both partners are saying, I don't really do that much, and this person makes me feel great about myself, and I wake up in the morning and I'm so happy. And both people are saying that, you got a pretty good situation, right? So ultimately, that's what we want at the workplace, not to date your boss, but have a situation, wouldn't recommend that, but have a situation where your boss feels like they're getting a great deal from you, and you feel like you're getting a great deal from them, right? So what is it that we can do to sort of highlight cost versus reward? So my question is, what makes a supervisor or your manager or a CEO a great deal from an employee? What is it that you found that sort of moves the needle for your company, what you do? And it could be as simple as following your job description. It could be something outside of that. It could be your personality. It could be intangibles, any of those that you've experienced.
I think this one, maybe just a story goes with this. So part of my job is executive comms. So I'm very rarely in seat, right? I've been coaching the executive for their keynote, wrote their speech. And I had one executive who would always tell everybody, after the speech, they'd be like, oh, Andrew, great. That was a great speech. And he'd be like, oh, Lisa wrote it. I'm like, you're literally not supposed to say that. And he would say it all the time. But the reason he would say that was because we had built so much trust and integrity that was mutual. And so, we were ruthless with, so if anyone wants to do executive comms, it is a ton of fun. but you have to have thick skin. So, because we'd have like 2 annual customer conferences a year. So it was like the big 20, 30-minute keynotes. Who has attention span for that long? So it's brutal. Take me at least 6 months to write the speech because there was so much research, all the editing process. And he would take like a whole section, just highlight it in Google Docs. Boring. Thanks, buddy. Like, let me go rewrite that whole section again.
Chips.
Critique him, like, you didn't shave. Where's your hairspray? And like, you didn't steam your shirt. And he'd look at me, I'm like, I'm not steaming it. You need to go steam your shirt. You have to be like Mike up intent. There was so much trust and integrity. So I think that is where you don't even have to think about the give and get. It's like, I know I'm going to do my part. I know he's going to do his part. And we are just for the ultimate goal of, at the time, the audience was our customers. And I think that's like super important because you're not nitpicking. Like, I do love the dating analogy too, by the way. You're not like red flag, green flag. Is that a beige flag? We're just trying to get our stuff done. Everyone's doing their part. And it tends to come together really nicely.
That's great. Other input?
I want to speak to the if you're getting a good deal out of your employee, because I lead the media team at PSE.
Oh, awesome.
I have 2 gentlemen that work with me, and if you're coming right out of college, all you have is your work ethic, your enthusiasm, the skills that you brought. But when I had to hire Gerald, his name is Gerald, I hired him, and he came from Como, but he was more like shiny object, go after the fire. And, the strategy piece was not his long suit, but he came with such a work ethic. And we're remote most of the time. We're all in the office maybe twice a week. And so just knowing that I can count on him, he understands what is a story, what's not a story, his incredible enthusiasm. We're 24/7, so I know I can count on him and my other coworker. And so if you haven't been in the workforce, you don't have all this cachet, you do have your enthusiasm, your work ethic, just your curiosity. I can't say that enough, is curiosity about your company and what they do and be confident in those things that you can bring to the table.
Yeah, asking questions sometimes is just your leadership can be like, they care,
They
and
care, yes.
That means a lot. Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. My experience has only really been like, I'm an employee, but I think I've noticed, the enthusiasm and curiosity with journalism, especially meeting the community or coming with stories already or ideas that you can flesh out, shows kind of like an interest to really like improve what we're already doing or bring in new ideas. And I think that's usually favored. So,
and actually sorry, Mel, you're totally right when you said curiosity. And I would say at all stages of your career. Because sometimes, I've like led teams and almost like, well, why are we doing it this way? Well, because we've always done it that way. And it's so easy to get stuck in groupthink. I'm like, this is just how we do it. Like, the old adage, like what got you here won't get you where you want to go. And so sometimes being curious throughout your whole career will make you challenge like, well, maybe this is, we could be doing it better or more interesting way. So totally agree. Curiosity is super important.
That's awesome. Something that I think is as a workplace is that employees should feel like they belong, and it's just not in the workplace, it's in life. You feel like you should have a place in your community and your social group and wherever, in school. And so I think I was going to ask all of you, can you tell us about an experience where in your workplace you experienced like where you felt like you belonged and that was where you should be, or an experience where it totally felt like I don't belong here, that was horrible, and either situation would have probably led you to, I want to be here longer, I think I need to go somewhere else, right? So has there been an experience like that for any of you?
Oh, definitely.
Started with that, so it's like,
yeah, for sure. I think one of the reasons I think I stayed so long at the Times was because they usually do a pretty good job with diversity and equity and inclusion and all that. But I will say that I felt a lot of pushback when I was trying to initiate those conversations for the Latino community in particular. And so when you're in a place that touts equity very strongly, and then you try and pitch ideas or new like projects that kind of obviously fit along those lines, and they shut it down because, well, there's not enough. We don't really think our readers would care. It does make you feel very, very isolated, and it's kind of like it's a really hard thing to get through when you're entry level and are still trying to figure out, exactly where you're at or what your career will look like or what you want to make of it. And yeah, so that was also something that factored into my new role where I'm at now. I was specifically looking for a paper that the Latino community, and it's a border town, so it very much fits that. And most of my interviews are in Spanish, actually. We translate stories, and so I'm also building skills with photography. And so I think now I'm at a place where I can build upon my skill set in an environment that feels like comfortable and safe and conducive to like learning and making mistakes along the way. So
That's great.
yeah.
Lisa.
I feel like I have so many stories.
Stories are great.
The
That's
most
why we're here
applicable
today.
one. Okay. I'll share two.
Okay.
One's very comms related. One's just like, I don't know. Again, that's just how did I get into tech maybe. So I worked in Xbox very early days, like right after launch, before Xbox Live existed. So it was not glorious, by the way, but great stories come from it. But before going to Microsoft and in the Xbox, was a lifeguard. I managed pools. I got paid to work out. Like, it was a great gig. Obviously not an adult job. So I go to Microsoft. I work on the Xbox hardware team. And I was an executive assistant on contract. It was just like an interim. I stayed like 14 years. But I had to order pieces of the motherboard that goes inside the console. And I literally was like, what's a motherboard? That's a supply closet. Like, the paper, the highlighters. Then I'm like, nope. And I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't have an engineering degree. I'm not even like tech savvy or excited to be here, frankly. I just want my paycheck. And then, and my boss was the VP of Xbox hardware, and Bill Gates is like favorite. And I literally don't know what to do. And there was a chip and there's the parts I don't even know what it's called. And like literally like knocking on the door of people's offices, who looks like the nicest engineer. Do you know what a motherboard is? I need 5. And it was really embarrassing, but I just was like, well, I have to get this order in. This is technically my job. And so my VP was gone on business trip. He came back. Parts got ordered, by the way. But then he was just like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, I'm just like stressing out. Like, I feel like you should get a different assistant. And he's like, why? Everybody loves you. My calendar schedule's done. And I go, because I don't understand how computers work. I really I know how to type, and these are all the skill sets. No one told me I know computer parts. And no joke, I still have this book. He came into my office, and there's the old school book from, this was like 2001 maybe, How Computers Work. It is, go look it up. That's literally what I used to order Xbox hardware parts.
Oh my goodness.
For like 6 months. And then I'd spend all my lunch hour in the lab.
Why are you soldering these pieces together? So I definitely felt like I didn't belong. I literally was like, please fire me. I should leave. And they were like, nope, we got you. Like, we'll teach you.
Awesome.
And all the hardware engineers were the nicest guys. Like, why are you here? And I was like, because I need to know what parts to order, you guys. And I wasn't even on the supply chain team. It was just that startup piece. So sometimes, even if you don't feel like you belong, like just find a friendly face. People will help you and kind of help you navigate to get there. And kudos to my boss at the time, because that book is very elementary. Like, if there's cliff notes for computers, it's coming up.
That's awesome.
So yeah, do that one.
My story's really short, but when I was at the state DOT, I went to college at UW first. I know, 3. But UW was kind of shuttering its communication school at the time, and then Borough was really ramping up, and so I came here. But originally, when I went to college, I wanted to be a bridge engineer, and totally into that. But my first physics class kind of told me that wasn't going to be my future. So when I worked for the State Department of Transportation, I did a lot of work with the bridge teams. I worked with our maintenance, the guys who take care of the bridges. And I was just very curious, and I didn't know a thing about it. Like, Lisa. It's like, but I was very curious and I spent time with them, and we had the internal communications arm of DOT as well. So I really found myself to showcase the work going on, that our crews were taking care of and really making sure that they were there for travelers. And so the bridge guys really appreciated having me there. They would call for me to do stories versus other people on my team. And I didn't really like being the favorite, but I just was I felt close. And that's my sense of belongings, because I felt like I earned their trust and I became on their team. And so just, again, curiosity and passion. And I hate the word passion, but just I was already sort of interested in it. And the piece that was the emotional piece was that these people took care of the infrastructure so that people could drive across the bridges every day, and they kept them safe, and they were very serious about it. And that's what I admired about the people. If you have admiration like you did for your coworkers, that's a big piece of it too.
That's awesome. Do you want to add another anecdote, another story?
Oh, it was just a calm story, but
Okay.
it's equivalent. But okay, we can move on.
Okay.
It was just-
Yeah, in my case, I mean, the reason why I generated that question is because I worked at another university, gonna name names, but it was, for a long time, and I didn't know, because I went there on any given week, and I felt great in my classes teaching my students. Like, that's where I felt like myself. But with my colleagues and my leadership, I didn't feel comfortable, and I didn't feel like I belonged, and I didn't feel like I could be truly Imran. And when I gave them feedback, they didn't acknowledge or do anything with it. And the reason I'm telling you that story is because that's the wrong way of doing things. I'm sorry, like that's unacceptable. And just to give you an idea, like, our faculty meetings in Murrow have 65 people on the invite list on Zoom. Everybody's invited, right, to our staff faculty meeting. In their decision-making informational meetings, they had 9 people on the list. That's it. Nobody else was allowed in. And you could only go in if you were tenure tracked. And right there, that puts a pit in my stomach. Like, that's like, you can't sit at this lunch table. Only these people can. And that's wrong. And so the reason why I'm telling you that is because you cannot, in my opinion, you should not work in an environment where those types of dynamics and hierarchies and power influences are occurring. It doesn't. That's really not the way that, especially university, for goodness sakes, should operate, right? That the lack of inclusivity there was wild, and I didn't know any different, so I stayed there for many years, 8 years, and so it's important to consider your feelings and your belongingness is a big deal. In today's world, the next question would be, what is the question a student can ask in an interview to get comfortable with the idea of working somewhere and feeling like themselves, and feeling like they belong? So what's a key question that you because I know that's something that's also less discussed, is how does the candidate interview the company at a job interview, right? What do you need to find out? And so what advice would you have on what questions somebody should ask at the end of the interview, possibly, if that's when they ask them?
That was a tough one. I struggled with this one because it's all about access. And if you're at a larger company, you want to know that you are not going to be kind of in a corner, only people when spoken to, and that your skills can be, that you'll have an opportunity or at least to have exposure. And so I struggled with this last night. I'm like, what would be that question? And one would be the day-to-day. What is this job like on a day-to-day basis? How many other people in other departments would my role interact with? And so to me, that shows that there's exposure capability, there's navigability throughout the company versus, well, you're going to sit and you're going to update media lists and you're going to look at a database. And then the remote versus in-person question as well. Our company, we're only supposed to go to the office, or supposed to. We're asked to be in the office about 50%. And when I'm there, sometimes I'm like, gosh, I'm on Teams all day and here I am in this hotel desk. But there are times when I see people that I only see on a screen, or I bump into someone that I've only kind of emailed with. And so understanding that culture pre-COVID, it was 8 to 5, 7 to 6 in the office. Now that's unheard of. And I think that's something to really get a sense of is, are people remote? Are they in the office? And if they're in the office, when are they in the office? I don't ask my team to come in the office unless we have a team meeting, there's an event, I've coordinated with another team. As the lead I'm sort of party planner. I have to make it worth their while to come in. So those kinds of questions about the day-to-day, what's my role, where's my access, how many people I'm dealing with, I think would be helpful.
Okay. Other questions?
I think you should ask more than one question. You should have a list
Because
and I think, and typically you have like an initial interview with the recruiter, then you might have like a phone interview with the hiring manager, and then when you have an interview, right, you get to meet more of the team, more kind of your point, like the stakeholders. So you have questions for all. Like you have to be happy. Like even if you're not at work, most likely you're going to be thinking about your job. You're around or doing whatever. So make sure you want to be there. So I think with the recruiter, you can ask like all the HR, like benefits, what are the work hours, is it remote, is it not, blah, blah, blah. Then I think when you get to the hiring manager, you can ask what I mentioned earlier, like make sure you're going to learn what you want from this experience or whatever it might be, right? You just want to work at a big company or a smaller company, or you want to have experience doing comms or whatever. Get those questions and ask the hiring manager that. And then also take it with you to the interview to make sure the answers match. You go talk to other people, especially if there are other people that report to that manager, because then you can see like their management styles that ring true to what they're speaking and saying. The other thing I would also just add into the questions is it's so important to be curious. I feel like that's what we should name this panel is, and ask all these questions, because every time I've hired people internally or externally into a company or on my team, some questions they ask actually make me want to hire them more than just, oh yeah, this is a college I went to, I've had this experience, I worked at this company. That's great. Because by actions, I'm able to learn how you think, how you process. And then just to not be vague, one question I would ask is specifically like, if I was in this role for 6 months, what would my success look like? Because one will be partly motivated by that team and their objectives, but then because you're somehow going to make us communicate way better, or where you're going to bring a media,
Questions.
I think is really important.
That is awesome advice.
Questions.
Anything else to add?
No, I feel like y'all covered everything. I would just say LinkedIn is great because you can reach out to people currently working there and ask them what they think about the work culture, the environment. Because, usually you would hope the recruiters or people interviewing you are honest, but it's good to just hear it also from someone who's, I guess, like on the other end of things. And I've done that too with jobs in newsrooms, and there were a lot that I didn't follow through with the process because I spoke to journalists that were already there, and they didn't have very good things to say about, the environment there. So it helps.
That's great. But how many people have a LinkedIn? All right, you're on your way. Questions from the audience? Are there any questions before I ask another one? Yes.
I have a quick question. Say in like a career, how do you communicate that you are curious and wanting to learn more about the role or what it does, or how did it look?
That's a great question, but I feel like I'm going to give do you tell them to write a cover letter? I feel like I'm going to give bad advice or anti-advice. I'm not a fan of cover letter.
I am not either, but.
I love cover letters.
For
different reasons.
I would say both as a prior corporate recruiter and then, a leader of a team reading resumes, if I have to read anything, I'm going to read the first page of your resume, and I obviously get ones where there are multiple. So we're not big fan of cover letter. However, I would say how you write your resume dictates a lot, because it's you can write it very passively, or you can write it very active, like I'm curious, I'm managing, I'm leading. Like those words do make a difference. And I also think it makes a difference to take your resume and the job description and make sure that the keywords match, because we're in tech. And so Boolean search strings pull keywords. It's the discernment of that recruiter and or hiring manager to see, that project's and that skill set seems very complicated. You must be curious, right? They'll make some assumptions. You'll get a call on that basis.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of cover letters because I'm around a while. It's you get when a resume gets to me, it's already gone through the screening process. It's gotten to the hiring stage, and there are times where the candidate lives in Arizona, or they're not in the industry, and so the cover letter can really fill in that gap because I can look at that resume and go, "Gosh, they're in Arizona. I can't pay for them to relocate. I don't know if there's all these." Demands that I've made up in my own head that may not be there. That person might have a family member they're planning on moving. That doesn't come in a resume. So it's like, yes, I'll be moving there in 6 months. Another thing in a cover letter is, especially in communications, and if you do media, there's an opportunity for you to connect with the hiring manager. I read this article about natural gas and that kind of stuff. I work for Puget Sound Energy. So they're showing that you're curious because you've been out there, you've been researching, you connected the dots, this role, this newspaper article. So it's a chance to tell your story versus having the resume. Both are very valuable. And like Lisa said, there's the first process is very 5 seconds. It's got to come through in the resume. So it's later that the cover letter gets across.
Anything to add, Daisy?
No, I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Well, are there other questions? Great question. Thank you for asking the question. So yeah, I think one thing that students need to consider in your situation is if you're going to hit the job market soon, what type of company do you work for? We've talked a lot about belongingness, inclusiveness, company culture, but part of that is at that university I talked about, I could not take a non-federally recognized day off. It was a big deal. Like they didn't want me to cancel my classes. And so I guess my question to the panelists would be, have you had an experience where employees ask you for, personal PT or to take their cat to the vet, and how's that treated? Because definitely there's a difference in environments where some companies are very rigid and they're just like, nope, you have to take time off, you have to request it, you can't just leave for 4 hours. And so I think today's workforce, in my opinion, it would mean a lot for a lot of you to go to a company where they're like, oh yeah, come back in 3 hours after you get back from the vet, or take a cultural day, because the recognized doesn't mean that it's not important, right? So have you had experience with that where you've had a conversation with an employee, and how do you think that they should approach that? I don't know if it's worth asking that question in the job interview. Can I take personal time? Are there cultural days? What do you think?
I think if you're at the process at the very end, that's a conversation. But part of it also is knowing the company policies about leave.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have personal holidays, and I think that's one of the ways that companies can accommodate a special cultural observance. Yours was different because you're on the canceled classes. You're impacting other people directly. I can't speak to that, but the companies that I've been part of, whether it's a public sector, private sector, even PSE, there are personal holidays, there's PTO, and just the flexibility. COVID taught the company a ton. There's a lot of mental health. We saw it in the field. We saw it with our workers. Had people take their lives. It was just, so that was a wake-up call to companies about mental health and the priority that it is. And it's not like, take your mental health day and here's some books you can read. And, we have these videos that we produce internally where people have these stories that they tell in these videos, these mandatory mental health videos we have to take. It's not a training. It's changing stories that people went through this issue, and the purpose is for the other employees to see themselves in the person on the. So I'm not answering the question, but you can ask about what are the leave policies. If they have personal holidays, those a lot of different days, there's a different color for vacation time, then that's a pretty sign.
Yeah, that's great. Anything?
No, I don't think I've ever, because my first job was at a bigger, and I feel like it was really hard to even ask for time that I am allowed off, right?
Yeah.
Sick days or vacation, because I was the only one working that schedule from after 6 p.m. feel like a lot of responsibility. But you shouldn't ever let yourself feel that way, because that is unfair. Like, you have your sick days and you have your vacation days, and you should take them. Yeah, and where I'm at now, because it's smaller, it's a lot more relaxed. Like, it'll be like, oh, well, I have to take my cat to a deployment, so I'll just like stay an hour extra. Or yesterday I worked like 2 hours more, so I'll just take it off Friday.
Yeah.
Something like that to like level it out. Yeah, so it very much depends on who you're working with and what kind of communication you have with your manager, and how good and respectful that environment feels to you, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say there's like a question in the interview process, but to what you're saying, Daisy, I think that making sure that your values and whoever you're going to be with, your values align. You feel like you get that, like, like you sound like a date, like, okay, this is a good vibe together, we're going to work well together. I think that's super important to trust your gut in that. And then I think once you're in the job, if things come up, then I think you kind of just deal with those, along the way. I'll say for me, teams I've led, I could care less. I care less where they're at. Me too. Go to the gym, or I had somebody used to tell me like every day I'm going to lunch. I'm like, we don't even have a clock in, clock out system. I don't care. Don't tell me to go to the bathroom either. Because for me, I'm like, I hired you because you have this skill set and this is your job. So as long as your work is getting done, I don't really care. Now, and so everyone's been on my team. That's literally what I say. Now, there's one person who took that to an exact extreme, and that's when I'm like, okay, we got to rein that in.
Yeah.
But, if you're trustworthy and you're doing your work and it's getting done, then that's all that really matters. And I just think I've had both myself personally, and then people on my team have had, like a parent who was dying, or a child that was sick, just things like that. Work is still going to be here, and as good teammates will cover you. And I think that, at least for me, those are good environments, cultures, I think, to be in. That
it's great to hear you say that, because going through a 4-year degree, students I don't think hear that stuff enough on how to evaluate a company. And for me, when we talked about cost versus benefit, the biggest benefit I would argue for my line of work or whatever job I would ever take in the future would be autonomy. And that's just because I'm on a 9-month contract at Washington State University. I get 3 months off and I get paid less technically because I'm on a 9-month contract, but I don't care. Like, I would take that autonomy any day of the week, right? And that's not everybody, but I think that's one thing that you need to look at is the structure for, like what Lisa just said. I don't care if you're going to leave as long as your stuff gets done. That's awesome. Not every company's like that. A lot of my wife works for a company where they had software where it counted her key punches and her time and movement of her mouse and when she was away. And I told her 2 weeks after they input the software, I said, you need to look for, in my opinion, you need to look for a different job. She's like, this is outrageous. I feel stressed every day monitoring my movements. And if my computer goes to black screen, or I'm not keep track of it, and they're going to penalize me for it and say, why aren't you working for, X amount of time? And that's not the type of environment I would argue is healthy, right? So, but that's not stuff you hear about when you're looking at sort of the overview of the job market. Are there other questions? We have about 7 minutes. Yes.
So in a leadership role, you're kind of subject to like racism coming to your voice. So how do you guys respond to the criticism that you don't necessarily agree with, while making sure that the employees are?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good question.
I guess I'll go because that was such a good question. I think it depends on your management, your leadership style, because you can be a leader and be an individual contributor. And maybe along the same lines. I think if you get the vibe that someone's a micromanager, red flag. I mean, just next, go to the next. Like, that person will make your life just awful. But I think being a really good leader is being open to feedback. And there's a difference between whining and constructive feedback. And so as a leader, and again, even as an IC, having that discernment of like, are you whining because you feel overwhelmed and overworked? Well, then we can get to the root cause of that. Are you saying, hey, Lisa, I'm really frustrated. You make us, you're really critical of PowerPoint slides. Okay, that's fine. Then tell me how we can help and like work through that as well. So that would probably be my advice, is that people aren't open to feedback.
That's great. Anything else to add?
I think you can ask the question in an interview. That's one that I've asked is, how do you give feedback? How do I know if I'm doing a good job? You know, how am I going to know? And I hate to say, what's your leadership style? Because then they can go in a totally different direction. But how do you get back in? How do I know if I'm doing a good job? And that's where you can kind of, that's a tough one for everyone to answer. So I think they'd like that question.
That's an awesome question to ask. Was there another hand up? I don't know if I missed someone.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So obviously you're trying to talk about costs and benefits. So I'm just curious what your approach is when it comes to, especially I would say more early on, maybe when you're trying to work your way into a deal with something like that. What kind of the balance would be between sort of advocating for yourself, as you've been talking about, but also potentially having to make certain sacrifices for a position toward your way up, or when to kind of know when maybe not everything is perfect within the position you have, but sliding through it versus kind of backing out of it is this consciousness.
That's also a great question. I would say this. This is my career advice that I've held, and then give it to folks on my team. You should have a mentor inside your company that can help you navigate, like the political landscape. There's just inevitably something like that. So have them so they can guide you in the company, but then have a mentor outside of it in your profession. So even if that's your current job, it's like your goal job, because this person outside the company doesn't have the group think that the person has, and then they'll probably be your gut check of like, nope, just keep pushing through, you're going to be fine. And or they'll be like, bail, let's try to like get you to network. I think is really important. And I would also say, just make sure you don't sell yourself short. So make sure you believe in yourself. You've earned the right to be whatever that in that interview at that company. And so once you're there, like, don't take a lesser than job. Like, I started on executive. If I'd go back, I wouldn't have done that, because I literally started at the lowest level of the company, and it took me 5 years to get to like a normal level. But at the same time, like, I'll maybe do like the 80-20 rule. 80% of this job is fine. I don't like 20%. That's probably true of everybody in whatever job we have. And at the same time, are you learning your top 2 or 3 things that you want in that job? Then it's probably okay to tough it out. But then give yourself a time box too. I'm going to do this for a year. I'm going to do this for 18 months. And then move up.
Awesome input. Anything to add, Daisy?
Yeah, I think the 80-20 is great, because nothing is ever going to be perfect, right? So if you can find a job that sort of balances out, like, okay, I like the city, I like, whatever the job description is, and then you're able to sort of identify, okay, maybe I don't like this, but I like all these things, and I'm growing. And as long as you're growing, and as long as you're learning something, and it feels like, you're not giving everything you have for nothing, then, that's how, like, tough it out. But the moment that it starts to feel like it's taking so much out of you, or it's asking so much of you, and your manager doesn't really care about, like, growing you, especially early on, or like giving you all the opportunities when you've expressed it, then that's when you could go somewhere else, because you gotta put yourself first too.
That's great. Any final thoughts?
Really quick, let your manager know, not that you're not unhappy and not getting that, but just if things that you see or things you want to do and you're not being given that opportunity. As a manager, I'm heads down. I've got my own book of work. And so if the employee comes to me and says, I'd really like to do this, I was like, really? I didn't even know if we had the bandwidth. I didn't know if you have the interest. So identify something that maybe you're not doing. See if there's an opportunity for you. Talk to your manager, your supervisor, and say, I'd really like to learn about this. Is there any opportunities there? And they'll either say yes or no. What's hard is that there's a finite number of people on my team, finite roles. There's not a lot of opportunity for the guys on the media team to now do government affairs, and they could, but just have good communication with your manager. You never know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Let's give the panelists.
Thank you.